Hi, boys and girls. It's Miss Murphy. All right, we are going to get ourselves ready for our online virtual practice reading lesson. Let's make sure that our bellies are to the table, our feet are on the ground, our hands are either in our lap or on our table, our eyes are watching the screen, and our ears are listening so we can get our job done and stay on task. That's right, you look like you're ready for learning. Let's begin with some blends. Remember, a blend is when two letters come together to make a sound. The letters we see here are F, L. Can you say F, L? Good. When we blend those sounds together, it sounds like full. You try. Full. Good. Like in flag. Can you say flag? Good. Our next blend to know is CL. Can you say CL? Good. When I blend the sounds together, it sounds like cool. Cool. Can you make that noise? Cool. Very good. Like cloud. You say cloud. Awesome. Now let's review this week's sight words. Repeat after me. As. The tree is as tall as my house. Our. My brother and I cleaned our bedroom. Red. Many fire trucks are red. That. Look at that big bird in the sky. Great job. This week and all of the last 2 weeks, we've been learning about our country, home of the free and the brave. And our essential question is, what makes the USA special? Remember, this week we are learning all about our leaders. Let's begin with a warm-up. Thumbs up if you can remember the first president of our country. What was his name? I see a lot of thumbs up. Repeat after me. Say George Washington. Very good. What do you remember about George Washington? That's right. I heard you say that he was our first president, and before he was the president, he was in the Army. Very good. And I heard you remind each other that he lived on a farm. That's right. Okay. Can you tell your turn and talk partner the name of another president you know? Give me 5. That's right. I heard a few friends say they remember the name Abraham Lincoln, and other friends said they remember the name Donald Trump or Joe Biden. Those are all presidents of our country. Let's read our objective. I'll read and you read. That sounds like you saying it out loud. Remember, I'm walking around the room. I can hear you. I can identify the author's purpose by circling. I can tell who and what the story is about by drawing and writing what I learned. Whoa, that was a big objective. But our objective looks exactly like yesterday. We will first circle the author's purpose, then draw who the story was about, something you learned, and write a sentence to match. That's our kindergarten reading nonfiction standard 4.1, and we're focusing on writing today. Okay, let's set the purpose. Yesterday, we learned about our first president, George Washington. Today, we are going to learn about another president. His name is Abraham Lincoln. He was also born in February, on the 12th. He was a very important president in our country's history. He brought the beginning of change to our nation. Before we begin, let's remember that authors write for 3 reasons. They write to inform or teach. They write to entertain or give us a story that is enjoyable. Or they write to persuade, get us to do something. Yesterday we read George Washington, and we learned that George Washington was in the Army and he was our country's first president. I'm going to step in and pretend to be a kindergartner now. While I'm modeling, I want you to think about what I'm thinking, what I'm saying, and what I'm doing, because I'll ask you some questions. First, I'm going to think about yesterday's story, George Washington. What was the author's purpose for writing this story? Let me think through. Well, the author wasn't trying to get me to do something. They didn't want me to be George Washington or to like him the most. They weren't persuading me, so I am not going to circle persuade. They weren't writing to entertain me. It didn't have made up characters and a made up setting. Instead, it had true characters. The real man, George Washington, and it told his real life story. That means I learned something. That's right. The author's purpose was to inform me. When I learn something, they're trying to inform. Now I'm going to think about what I remember from the book. Who was this book about? We didn't learn about Martin Luther King yesterday, and we didn't learn about Abraham Lincoln. That's right, this was about George Washington. So next I will need to draw a picture of George Washington, and then think about one event that I recall or I remember. George Washington was in the Army. He was a soldier. So here's my paper. First, I circled the author's purpose. Next, I drew George Washington. That's his portrait. I finished the sentence. This is George Washington. Then I drew a picture of something I remembered from the story. This is him being a soldier. And I wrote, I learned George Washington was a soldier. What did you hear me do first? That's right, I had to think about the author's purpose. And I don't just circle any of them. I had to think through and eliminate the answers that didn't make sense. What did you hear me do next? Good. I had to remember who the story was about and then draw their picture and write. What did you hear me do last? Great job, friends. I had to draw a picture of something I remembered from the story. I remembered he was a soldier, so I drew that and I wrote a sentence to match. All right, today we are reading a new story, but instead of me reading a book and you not being able to see the pictures, I found a video. Today we are learning all about Abraham Lincoln. Can you say Abraham Lincoln? Great. I'm going to play the video. You have to remember who this story is about and then remember one thing you learned so you can draw it later on our exit slip. Okay, let's get ourselves ready. Sit up in your chair. Eyes on the screen. Ears are listening. Let's make it big so that you can see. Wow, I can tell you're ready to listen. Well, wait patiently as it loads.
Hey everyone! Last time I read to you the story of one of America's most famous landmarks, the Statue of Liberty. And today, I would like to tell you about one of America's greatest presidents, Abraham Lincoln. Are you ready? Let's go! From the time he was a little boy, Abe was a hard worker. He helped on his parents' farm, planting corn and pumpkins. Abe and his sister Sarah went to school in a one-room schoolhouse. They walked for miles to get there and back, even in snow. Abe studied hard. He learned to read and write. Abe loved to learn, and he read every book he could find. When Abe was 7, his family moved to the settlement of Little Pigeon Creek, Indiana. Abe learned to use an axe. He helped his father clear the forest for a farm and a cabin. There was no longer time for school. Since Abe always had to work to help his family survive, his total schooling added up to less than 1 year. By the time Abe had finished growing, he was very tall, 6 feet 4 inches. That's 1 meter 93. Abe knew he didn't want to be a farmer like his father, but what could he do? He decided to leave home to find out. Abe got a job on a flatboat. He was such a good worker that the boat's owner offered him a job in his store in New Salem, Illinois. The people of New Salem quickly grew to love and trust Abe. Abe was so honest that once, when he charged someone too much money, he ran outside to give the money back. Throughout his life, he had the nickname Honest Abe. People started to go into the store just to ask Abe's advice. Sometimes they asked him about the laws or rules of the town. Abe wanted to study more, so he studied law all by himself and became a lawyer. Abe moved to Springfield, Illinois, to work with a lawyer friend. One of Abe's jobs was to keep track of the lawyer's papers. He kept some of the papers inside his tall hat. When Abe was 28, he met Mary Todd. Mary and Abe were different in many ways. Abe was tall and thin. Mary was short and plump. Abe came from a poor family. Mary came from a rich family. Although Abe was shy, the two fell in love. They married and had 4 children together. At that time, white people were allowed in some states to own black slaves. The slaves were forced to work hard, and they did not get paid. They were not treated well. The slaves did not have any rights. Abe spoke out against slavery. He became very famous. Some people asked Abe to run for President of the United States. Abe said yes. Soon it was time for the people to vote. The votes were counted, and surprise, Abe won. The Lincoln family moved from Illinois to the White House in Washington, D.C. Abe greeted happy crowds on his whistle-stop train trip to Washington. Everyone in the country loved the Lincoln boys. They were sent a lot of presents, including a pony and 2 goats. The goats got loose once inside the White House and made a mess during a fancy party. But trouble was brewing. The people who lived in the states that allowed slavery did not like Abe. They said he was not their president. 11 states broke away from the United States. They did not want to be part of a country that was against slavery. The United States was no longer united. Now, the country was at war, the Civil War. More than anything, Abe wanted to end slavery. All men are created equal, he declared. Finally, he was able to help pass a law to free the slaves. Abe went to the battlefields and gave speeches to ask people to stop fighting. It took years for the Civil War to end. Abe was constantly interrupted while he worked, and not just by his sons. Each day, people stood in long lines waiting to speak with the president. They asked him for money and for help finding jobs. When the war was finally over, crowds of joyful people went to the White House to cheer for their president. Abe was proud that there was no more slavery. Now, he had to bring the country back together. Sadly, Abe died before the United States was fully united in peace. Now, we cannot finish Abraham Lincoln's remarkable life story without giving you a few fun facts about his legacy. Did you know that Abraham Lincoln was the tallest United States president and first president with a beard? Lincoln made Thanksgiving.
All right, so now we need to think. Let's think about the author's purpose. Why did they make this video? Was it to inform or teach us? Thumbs up if you think so. Was it to entertain us or give us a good time? Thumbs up if you think so. Was it to persuade us? Thumbs up if you think so. Now turn and tell your neighbor, what was the author's purpose? And tell them how you know. I want to hear you. Great. Give me 5. I heard Naomi say she knows the author's purpose was not to persuade us. They didn't try to get us to do anything. And I heard Rain say she doesn't think the author's purpose was to entertain us. She thinks it was pretty enjoyable to listen to that, but she learned a lot more than enjoyed it. So she thinks the author's purpose was to inform. All right, now we need to tell our partner, who was this book about? Was it about your cat? Was it about your mom? Was it about your dad? Or was it about someone else? Turn and tell your neighbor. Good. Give me 5. I heard lots of friends say this book was about Abraham Lincoln. If that was you, kiss your brain. Now, finally, what do you remember from this story? What did you learn? Wow, that was some great sharing. Give me 5. I heard Jaden say Abraham Lincoln wore a tall hat. And I heard Ethan say Abraham Lincoln was very tall. And I heard Genesis say Abraham Lincoln wanted us all to be treated equal. He didn't like that people were slaves. That is not kind. Let's use these words. Say, this book was about Abraham Lincoln. Good. Now say, I learned Abraham Lincoln was tall. Say, I learned Abraham Lincoln lived in the White House. Say, I learned Abraham Lincoln wore a top hat. There's a lot more things you could have learned. So if we didn't say one of yours, keep it in your mind. Remember, your job today is to circle the author's purpose and tell who and what the story was about by drawing and writing. So let's check to get our stars. We have to circle, draw, label, and tell the media recording. Okay, just like yesterday, at the top, circle the author's purpose. In the mirror, draw who this story was about. and write their name. On the back side, you need to draw something you learned and finish the sentence. It already says, I learned. I will set a timer for about 15 minutes. At this point, you need to raise your hand so you can get your paper. Remember, you've done such a nice job listening. We have to finish strong by completing our work. And then in the media recording, you will tell the camera what you drew and what you learned. All right, friends, let's move on. At this point, raise your hand so you can get started. Great job listening. Bye now.